Thank you. Is the sound working okay? Yes. Great. Okay, so how many of you have teenagers? Okay. So my teenage daughter, Bryn Rose, thinks I'm a renegade. And it's quite a fun role reversal to be the troublemaker. She thinks that I'm a renegade because she's grown up in a world where she's been told she can do anything. She's been told by her teachers and her school and and the media that she should pursue STEM, and she's in the highest level of math. And she believes she can do it. And she believes that she's never been treated differently because she's a girl. So she thinks I make too big a deal out of gender. I have to explain to her sometimes that the fight for equality has been continuous, and that many basic rights are actually pretty recent. Did you know that just 30 years ago, the Women Business Ownership Act was passed? And before that, women business owners couldn't get a loan in their own name. They actually had to have a male relative co-sign for them. And this was 1988. This was the 80s. Can you imagine Madonna needing to get a male relative to co-sign for a loan? Right? So the reversal of laws like this based on gender have led to a lot of prosperity and innovation for our country. Did you know that 44% of businesses are women-owned? Now our new challenge is gender parity on boards. Boards can contribute to corporate misconduct and failure, as we've seen. You've seen examples in the news of groupthink, boards that are too cozy and that aren't comfortable challenging the CEO thoughtfully. And the current reality is this. For the past 12 years, women have exceeded men in graduate school enrollment. There's 137 women for every 100 men in graduate school. That's 58% of grad school. In stark contrast, we only have 21% of women serving on Fortune 1000 boards. And 36 California corporations have no women on their board currently. We just literally got the statistics this week, even after the law, of the Russell 3000 corporations. So these numbers alone, 58% grad school, 20% on boards, tell us talent is being left on the table. Corporations are missing out and they're messing up. But things are changing. Just 6 months ago, the S&P 500 last holdout just added a woman on its board. So now for the very first time in history, every company on the S&P 500 has at least one woman on its board. Yeah. And more importantly, if you look at the Russell 3000, which is actually more of a benchmark of the entire US stock market, those numbers are good, and Erica spoke to some of that. But in 2018, we had 17.7% women on boards, and this year in 2019, we have 20.4%. And then in our own California, we've swept that, and we're leading the nation now at 21.1%. So that 20% was the women on boards goal 9 years ago, and we reached that a year ahead of schedule. How did we do that? Right in our own backyard, we did that. Thanks to the National Association of Women Business Owners, 2020 Women on Boards, who partnered together with legislation last year that Jerry Brown signed for us a year ago that required publicly traded companies in California, principally headquartered in California, to add one woman on their board by the end of this year and up to 3 by 2021, depending on the size of their board. Not required to kick anybody off, adding a seat. And in 2019, 64% of companies did add a seat for a woman. And that means over 1,000 seats for women over the next 3 years. Our CEO of 2020, Betsy Berker-McCredere, has said, in an ideal world, no one wants a law, but change doesn't happen without it. I believe we would not be celebrating this milestone today if not for that law. So let's have some applause for getting progress done in our fine state here. So if you're here today, you're probably thinking, gender equality sounds fair, sounds good, but what's really going to change with women on boards? So there's 3 things you need to know about that. The first is increased profitability. Credit Suisse and Morgan Stanley have done studies that show that having women on boards increases profitability in corporations. It also increases product innovation. One of my favorite stories, I have a colleague who many years ago was one of the very first women on the board of a very famous mattress company. And she was sitting in the boardroom, and they were talking about products, and she was going through menopause. And she suggested a cooling mattress. And the men in the room couldn't figure out the relevance of that. And so they tabled it, they shelved the idea, but nevertheless, she persisted. And at a certain point, they said, fine, we'll do it. We'll put it into R&D. Of course, it grew up to become one of the best sellers and huge profits for the company. So you have to wonder, how many products are we missing out on by not having more women on boards? Number two, the second benefit with women on boards is reduced corporate crisis. As customers, investors, and employees of companies, we're acutely aware of the need to have good corporate governance in our institutions. It's really important for companies to appoint independent, qualified, and diverse board members who take their oversight responsibilities very seriously. This directly impacts stewardship, and it leads to reduced corporate crisis when you have that diversity on the board. The current board selection process, as most of you probably know by now, thanks to all of the awareness that this law has generated, is a closed recruitment process. It favors established networks, because that's how you get referred. And it can lead to a lack of diversity of thought and kind of a chumminess and a groupthink that isn't good for corporate governance. And we have too many examples in the news. I don't have to tell you, but Theranos, Tesla, every day there's something where it's like, oh, the board was a little too chummy, or didn't really challenge enough. So the solution is more women on boards. The third thing that will change with women on boards is equity. This next generation expects, and I can tell you as the mother of two daughters, they're going to demand to be included. They have grown up in a world where they believe that they will be included in everything. A recent Gallup poll showed that 56% of women prefer to work outside the home. And that is the highest in 3 decades, that number. We need to give them this opportunity. Companies that don't are going to come across as completely out of touch. And our top talent is not going to work for them. And another poll showed that only 14% of recent graduates want to work for a large organization because they perceive them as lacking in innovation and being out of touch and stuck in the way things are done. And they want to have an impact. Another small factor is institutional investors. I'm sure many of you are aware of BlackRock and State Street and Credit Suisse and our own CalPERS here. They've made it very clear that they see these 3 concepts that I'm talking about in terms of the benefits of women on boards, and they're voting with their feet. CalPERS just last year voted against 438 directors in 141 companies that had all-male boards, and that money talks. Ultimately, this is actually not really about gender. It's about having the most qualified people serving on our corporate boards for all of our best interests. Boards have the power to ask the questions and to demand the data, and to rectify the gender pay gap, to protect investors, employees, and our communities and public from abuse of corporate greed, self-dealing, cowardice, and abuse of power. So say it with me loud. We need more women on boards. So this is going to be my call to action to you. This is where you come in. You're never too old or too young to get involved. To the women in the room, if you haven't already, get ready to lead. We need you. Get the experience, work hard, build your network, get a sponsor, and also mentor someone else on your way up. It is possible to do both. Ask for opportunity, make your own luck. Do not wait to be asked to lead. I've created a guide to help you get started. If you text board ready to 44222, I can give you my top 10 steps in terms of beginning to prepare for a board. That's board ready to 44222. For the men in the room and the women in power, think of a high potential woman in your network. How will you sponsor her for a board seat or to serve on a commission or on a nonprofit board, all of which are great entry-level positions on the way up? Will you commit to being her echo chamber when she submits an idea or presents a question? And how about making sure she gets credit for those ideas and suggestions, a phenomenon that I think we're all aware of? It's doable, right? So let's make my daughter right. That gender isn't a barrier to the most powerful and prestigious leadership positions in America. I'm okay with her thinking that I make too big a deal out of gender as long as you help present the solution in this room. and get more women on boards. Thank you.